The twin moons of Zareth shone dimly over the towering estate of House Phalon, where nobles dined and laughed under golden chandeliers. But far from the grand halls, in a small chamber hidden behind thick stone walls, Vera sat alone, tracing patterns on the cold floor. The soft blue glow of her alien skin barely lit up the darkness around her. She had been blind since birth, and to her stepmother, Lady Caris, that made her useless. Vera was not treated as a noble daughter, but as an inconvenience, a hidden shame that Lady Caris wanted to erase. Though her father, Lord Athel, had once loved her, he had grown distant over the years, his judgment clouded by Caris's whispers. Tonight was no different. She could hear the sounds of celebration from the grand hall, her family hosting yet another banquet for important guests. She wasn't invited. She never was. A gentle knock came at her door. "Miss Vera," a soft voice whispered. It was Mira, one of the kindest servants in the household. Vera tilted her head. "What is it?" Mira hesitated before speaking. "I overheard Lady Caris talking. She plans to send you away." Vera's chest tightened. "Send me away?" "Yes," Mira said, her voice filled with worry. "She has arranged for you to be taken to a distant monastery by sunrise. She told Lord Athel it was for your own good, but I heard the truth. She doesn't want you here anymore." Vera swallowed the lump forming in her throat. She had known this day would come. Caris had always treated her like an embarrassment, someone unworthy of being part of Zareth's noble society. But to be cast out like this, without even a farewell from her father, it hurt more than she expected. "Miss Vera, you must leave before they come for you," Mira urged. "Where would I go?" Vera asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "The Duskwind wastes are dangerous, but beyond them, there are hidden settlements. There are people who might help." Vera hesitated. She had never been outside the estate, never walked alone beyond the safety of its walls. But staying meant a future locked away in isolation. For the first time in her life, she had to make a choice for herself. Taking a deep breath, she stood up. "I'll go." Mira handed her a cloak. "Hurry, before the guards notice." Vera slipped the fabric over her shoulders, feeling its weight settle over her trembling frame. She took a deep breath, listening carefully to the sounds around her. She had always relied on her other senses, her ears, her touch, her instincts. Now, they would be her only guide. She slipped into the hallways, keeping close to the walls as she moved. Her heart pounded as she heard voices in the distance. "She is nothing but a burden." Caris's sharp voice echoed through the halls. "By tomorrow, no one will even remember her." Vera clenched her fists. She would remember. She reached the outer gates unnoticed, thanks to Mira's instructions, but as she stepped beyond the estate's walls, a sharp gust of wind greeted her, carrying the scent of dry sand and distant storms. The Duskwind waste stretched before her, vast, unknown, and unforgiving. But it was also freedom. With one final glance back at the home that never truly was hers, Vera turned away and stepped into the night. Her journey had just begun. The Duskwind wastes stretched endlessly before Vera, a sea of shifting sand and jagged rocks. The cold night air wrapped around her, sharp and unforgiving. Each step she took was cautious, guided only by her keen hearing and the feel of the ground beneath her bare feet. She had never been outside the estate alone. Now she had no choice but to keep moving. The wind howled around her, carrying the scent of dust and dry earth. She could hear the distant calls of desert creatures, their voices unfamiliar and eerie. Somewhere far behind, the estate she once called home faded into silence. She was alone. Vera kept walking, though her legs trembled with exhaustion. She didn't know how far she had gone, or how much farther she had to go. She only knew that stopping meant being found, and being found meant a life locked away forever. But soon, her strength began to fail. Her breathing grew heavy, and her limbs ached. The sand beneath her feet became uneven, making her stumble. Then her foot caught on a hidden rock. She fell forward with a gasp, landing hard against the rough ground. Pain shot through her hands and knees, but she barely noticed. She was too tired, too cold. Darkness pressed in around her, even darker than the blindness she had known all her life. Maybe this was it. Maybe she had escaped one prison only to find another, one made of endless night and endless nothing. Her mind drifted, her body too weak to rise. Then, suddenly, a voice. "Hey, are you alive?" The words were deep, unfamiliar. Not the harsh voice of a bounty hunter or a noble's guard. Different. A sound of footsteps, slow and cautious. Then warmth, someone kneeling beside her, their presence strong and steady. "Hey," the voice came again, softer this time. "Can you hear me?" Vera forced her lips to move. Yes. There was a pause, then a sigh of relief. Good. That's good. The stranger shifted, and she felt something being draped over her shoulders. A coat, thick and warm. "What are you doing out here?" the voice asked. Vera hesitated. She didn't know who this person was. Could she trust them? I had nowhere else to go," she whispered. The stranger didn't respond right away. Instead, there was a moment of silence, followed by the sound of something being placed down beside her. "All right," the voice said at last. "I don't know why you're out here, but you won't last the night if you stay like this. You need shelter." A gentle but firm hand touched her shoulder. "Can you stand?" Vera hesitated, then nodded weakly. The stranger helped her up, his grip steady but careful. As she rose, she caught a faint scent, something metallic and strange, mixed with the scent of human skin. A human. She had never met one before, only heard stories. Humans were rare on Zereth, and most of the nobles spoke of them as outsiders, beings who didn't belong. But this human had found her in the dark and was offering her warmth, not cruelty. "What's your name?" the stranger asked as he guided her forward. "Vera." "I'm Daniel Carter," the man replied. "Looks like we both have a lot of questions." Vera wasn't sure how to answer that. She could feel the ground change beneath her feet, becoming firmer. The wind died down slightly, replaced by the faint echo of a cave. "This is my camp," Daniel said. "It's not much, but it'll keep you safe for the night." He helped her sit on something soft. Blankets, maybe. A small fire crackled nearby, its warmth brushing against her skin. Vera shivered, pulling the coat tighter around her. "Why? Why are you helping me?" Daniel was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Because I know what it's like to be stranded with nowhere to go." His voice carried something unspoken, a weight of experience, of loneliness. Vera didn't ask more. For now, she was warm. For now, she was safe. And for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel completely alone. When Vera woke, she wasn't sure where she was. The ground beneath her was soft, not like the rough sand of the duskwind wastes. A faint warmth brush edged against her face, and the air smelled of burning wood. The sound of crackling flames filled the silence. Then she remembered. She had run away. She had collapsed in the desert. And then Daniel Carter, the human, had found her. She sat up slowly, feeling the fabric of a thick coat still wrapped around her shoulders. The fire nearby gave off just enough warmth to chase away the cold of the night. "Awake already?" Vera turned her head toward the voice. "Daniel." His tone was calm, but there was a hint of amusement in it. "I didn't expect you to wake up so soon," he continued. "You were completely exhausted when I found you." Vera swallowed. She was still unsure of this stranger, but he had saved her, given her warmth, and asked for nothing in return. That was more kindness than she had ever known outside of Mira, the servant who had helped her escape. I didn't mean to trouble you," she said softly. Daniel let out a short chuckle. "Well, I wasn't exactly expecting company in the middle of the desert, but I think you've got bigger problems than that." She frowned. "What do you mean?" There was a pause before he spoke again. You're running from something, aren't you? Vera stiffened. She wasn't sure how much to tell him. After a moment, she whispered, "My stepmother. She wants me gone. She was sending me away to a place I'd never return from." Daniel didn't say anything for a while. When he finally spoke, his voice was quieter. "I know what that feels like." Vera turned her face slightly toward him. "You do." She heard him shift, probably leaning back against the cave wall. "I was part of a crew delivering medical supplies to a colony world. We got attacked by raiders. My ship crashed, and I ended up here." Vera listened closely. She could hear the pain in his voice, even if he tried to hide it. "You're stranded?" she asked. "Yeah," Daniel admitted. "And let's just say the local authorities aren't exactly friendly toward humans. I had to stay hidden." A silence fell between them, the crackling fire filling the space. Vera hesitated, then said, "I don't know much about humans, but you don't sound like the dangerous outsiders my people talk about." Daniel snorted. "And you don't seem like the cruel, arrogant nobles I heard about." She smiled faintly. It was strange how quickly she felt comfortable talking to him. But the moment was cut short when a distant noise reached them. A deep hum, mechanical and steady. Daniel stiffened immediately. "Damn it. What is it?" Vera asked, alert now. Daniel stood up quickly. "A patrol ship. They must be searching for someone." Vera's blood ran cold. "They're looking for me." Daniel cursed under his breath. "Then we need to move. Now." Vera stood, gripping the coat tightly. "Where can we go?" Daniel grabbed his backpack. "There's an old wreck nearby. It's got a few hidden tunnels underground. If we can get there before the patrol ship passes overhead, we'll be safe." He took her hand, his grip firm but careful. "Can you run?" Vera nodded. "I'll keep up." The next few minutes were a blur. The cool desert air rushed past her as they ran, their feet kicking up sand. Vera relied on Daniel's guidance, trusting his steady grip as he led her through the uneven terrain. Behind them, the sound of the patrol ship grew louder. She could hear the deep thrum of its engines, scanning the wasteland below. Then, Daniel pulled her sharply to the left. "Here, down." They ducked behind a ridge, sand sliding beneath them. Daniel reached out, feeling for something, then pulled the metal hatch open. "Inside," he urged. Vera crawled in first, followed by Daniel. The hatch shut just as the patrol ship passed overhead, its searchlights sweeping across the dunes. Silence. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then Daniel let out a breath. Safe, for now. Vera's heart pounded, but relief flooded through her. She turned toward Daniel, her voice steady. "Thank you." Daniel smirked. "We're not out of trouble yet, but I get the feeling you're not someone who gives up easily." Vera smiled. "Neither are you." And for the first time since her escape, she felt something close to hope. The hidden bunker beneath the sand was cold and quiet. Vera sat against the rough metal wall, listening to the distant hum of the patrol ship fading into the night. Her heart was still racing, but at least for now, they were safe. Daniel moved beside her, adjusting the light on his wrist device. The faint glow barely illuminated the space, but it was enough for him to check the small control panel near the entrance. This place was an old research outpost, he muttered, abandoned for years, but still useful for hiding. Vera ran her fingers over the uneven floor. "You've been here before." "Yeah," Daniel said. "When I first crashed, I used it as a shelter. Never thought I'd be back." Vera turned her face toward him. "Then, you've been alone this whole time." Daniel hesitated. "Pretty much." A silence settled between them. Vera understood loneliness well. She had spent years locked away in her own home, ignored and unwanted. Now, here she was, sharing a hiding place with a stranger. Yet, she felt less alone than ever before. She exhaled slowly. "Daniel, what do you think happens next?" Daniel sat down beside her, resting his arms on his knees. "Depends. Your stepmother. If she's powerful enough to send patrol ships after you, she won't stop. Vera clenched her hands. She wants me gone, but she also wants to control me. If she finds out I'm still alive, she'll try to use me as a political tool. Daniel rubbed his chin. Then we need to make sure she doesn't find you. Vera hesitated. Even if I stay hidden, I can't stay blind forever. Daniel looked at her, surprised. What do you mean? She took a breath. You're an engineer, right? You worked with human medical technology. Yeah, Daniel said slowly. You said before that my blindness might not be permanent. That human science, your nanotech, could fix it. Daniel exhaled, leaning back against the wall. That's true. My ship was carrying experimental neural implants, tech designed to restore sight, even to those born blind. Vera swallowed. Then, could you use it on me? Daniel hesitated. It's not that simple, Vera. The tech wasn't tested on your species. There's a chance it might not work, or worse, it could cause damage. She lifted her chin slightly. And if it does work? Daniel was silent for a moment. Then you'd be able to see. Vera's heart pounded. She had lived in darkness her whole life, relying on her other senses to navigate the world. The idea of seeing, of knowing what colors looked like, what her own face looked like, both thrilled and terrified her. Daniel studied her expression. Why do you want this now? Vera took a deep breath. Because I don't want to be powerless anymore. I don't want to spend my life hiding in the dark while others decide my fate. Daniel nodded slowly. All right, he said. But if we do this, you have to understand the risks. I do, she said firmly. Daniel ran a hand through his hair. Then, let's do it. He stood up, moving to the far side of the bunker, where his equipment case sat against the wall. He opened it carefully, revealing a sleek, silver device inside. This is the implant, he explained. Once inserted, it connects to your optic nerves. If your body accepts it, your vision will start processing within a few hours. If it doesn't, he trailed off, not wanting to say the rest. Vera swallowed her fear. I trust you. Daniel sighed. All right. Lay back. She did as he said, feeling the cool surface of the bunker floor against her skin. Daniel activated the device, and a faint hum filled the space. You'll feel a small sting. Vera barely flinched as he placed the device carefully at the side of her temple. A warm sensation spread through her head. And for a moment, she saw something, a flicker of light in the darkness. Then everything went black again. Daniel watched her closely. How do you feel? Vera exhaled. Strange, but not in pain. That's a good sign. Daniel checked the readings on his device. The system is calibrating. If it works, you'll start seeing shapes first, then colors. Vera lay still, waiting, heart pounding. Then something changed. A soft glow, faint and blurry, appeared before her. It wasn't just a sound or a feeling. This was something entirely new. Light. For the first time in her life, she was beginning to see. Vera's world was no longer just sound and touch. It was changing. At first, everything was a blur. Shadows and faint outlines flickered before her, shifting like ghosts in the darkness. She blinked, her mind struggling to process the strange new sensations. The glow of the fire nearby was the first thing she truly noticed, a soft, golden light flickering against the bunker walls. Her breath caught in her throat. She was seeing. It's working, she whispered. Daniel, who had been monitoring the implant's progress, let out a slow breath of relief. That's a good sign. Your body is accepting the tech. Vera turned her head toward his voice, and though she couldn't make out his features, she could see a shape, the outline of a person sitting close to her. A shiver ran through her. All her life, she had lived in darkness, relying on sounds, touch, and memory. Now, the world was opening up to her in a way she never thought possible. Daniel studied her carefully. Don't rush it. Your brain needs time to adjust. She nodded slowly. I understand. But before she could say anything more, a sharp noise echoed from outside. Daniel's head snapped up. Did you hear that? Vera tensed. She focused her hearing, shutting out everything else. Footsteps. Faint but steady. Someone was coming. Then, a loud bang at the metal door. Daniel shot to his feet, reaching for his weapon. They found us. Vera's stomach twisted. It's her men. My stepmother sent them. The bunker's entrance shook as the door was struck again. Daniel's mind raced. We have to move now. But it was too late. With a final explosion, the door was blasted open. Smoke and debris filled the air, and before Daniel could react, a group of armored soldiers stormed in. Vera barely had time to react before a hand grabbed her arm, yanking her up. She gasped, struggling, but her strength was nothing against the soldiers' grip. Her vision was still blurry, making it impossible to see their faces. Let her go, Daniel shouted, raising his weapon. A second later, something heavy struck him in the stomach. He fell back with a grunt, his weapon clattering to the ground. Daniel, Vera screamed. One of the soldiers stepped forward, his voice cold. Orders are to take the girl alive. Kill the human. No. Vera fought harder, twisting in their grip. Leave him alone. Daniel groaned, forcing himself up, but a rifle was already aimed at his head. Vera's heart pounded. She couldn't let this happen. Wait, she yelled. Take me, but don't hurt him. The lead soldier hesitated, then tapped his communicator. Lady Karis, we have her. A voice crackled through the device. Good. Bring her to me immediately. Dispose of the human. Vera's blood ran cold. She turned toward the blurred figure that was Daniel. No, I'll go with you willingly. Just let him go. The soldier didn't answer. He signaled his men, and in the next moment, Vera felt a sharp sting in her neck. A tranquilizer. Her body grew weak. Her vision darkened again. The last thing she saw was Daniel trying to reach for her, before everything faded to black. Vera's captivity. When she woke, she was no longer in the bunker. Cold metal walls surrounded her, and the scent of expensive perfumes and polished steel filled the air. The soft hum of an engine told her she was on a ship. Her hands were bound in front of her, and the implant in her head was pulsing, like her body was still adjusting. Her vision remained hazy, but she could make out shapes and colors. Then, a familiar voice reached her ears. I expected you to put up more of a fight. Vera stiffened. She knew that voice. Lady Karis. Her stepmother stepped forward, her elegant robes brushing against the floor. Vera could finally see the outline of her face, cold and sharp, just as she had always imagined. Karis tilted her head. You should be grateful. I had planned to send you away forever, but now I see an opportunity. Vera swallowed. What do you mean? Karis smirked. Your sudden return, your miraculous ability to see, it will make quite the story among the nobles. A blind daughter who was healed by human technology. The people will adore you. Vera's fists clenched. You're using me. Karis let out a soft laugh. Oh, my dear, of course. You will be the key to strengthening my influence. And as for that human, well, he is nothing more than a mistake I intend to erase. Vera's heart pounded. Daniel. Was he still alive? Had he escaped? She couldn't let Karis win. For years, she had been powerless. But now she could see. Now she had something to fight for. And she would not let her stepmother control her fate. Vera was locked in a small, cold cell deep within the Vailon family ship. But her mind raced. Her stepmother's words echoed in her ears, how Karis planned to use her newfound sight for her own gain. The cold metal walls around her felt suffocating, but she wasn't going to let that stop her. She had something her stepmother didn't, determination. The thought of Daniel, though, made her heart ache. Was he still alive? Had Karis's soldiers hurt him? She couldn't bear the thought of it. She needed to escape. Hours passed, and the haze from the tranquilizer had begun to wear off. Vera could see more clearly now, the world around her sharper, though still a bit blurry at the edges. Her sight, the one thing she had longed for all her life, was both a gift and a curse. For now, it felt like a weapon, one that could give her freedom or make her an even bigger target. She closed her eyes, trying to focus. She had to think. She had to be clever. The door to her cell opened suddenly, and a soldier stepped inside. His helmet was off, revealing his tired face. He looked down at her with a mix of indifference and pity. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said gruffly. "Lady Karis wants to speak with you." Vera felt a sharp pang of fear. Karis. The thought of facing her stepmother again made her stomach twist, but she knew this was her chance. If she didn't act now, she might never get another one. She stood, the chains around her wrists clinking softly. "Lead the way." The soldier motioned for her to follow. They walked through the narrow corridors of the ship, the low hum of its engines vibrating beneath her feet. As they passed other rooms, Vera could hear faint voices, but she ignored them, focusing only on the soldier in front of her. Eventually, they reached a large, well-lit chamber. At the far end, Karis sat on an elevated platform, looking down at her with a cold smile. She was surrounded by 2 guards, their hands resting on the hilts of their weapons. "Vera," Karis said, her voice smooth and calculating. "I see the human has done his work. You're awake." Vera didn't answer. She stood tall, meeting Karis's gaze as firmly as she could. "What is it you want from me now?" she asked, her voice steady despite the anger boiling inside her. Karis's lips curled into a smug smile. "I want you to help me, my dear. You're the miracle that will give me more power than I've ever had. You're going to help me take control of Zereth." Vera's heart raced. "And what makes you think I'll help you?" Karis's smile faltered for just a moment, then returned. "Because you don't have a choice." Vera's mind was already working, analyzing the situation. She couldn't let Karis use her. She had to find a way out, before it was too late. "You think you can control me," Vera said, her voice quiet but fierce. "But you don't understand. I won't be your puppet anymore." Karis's eyes narrowed. "You've always been a disappointment, Vera. You've never understood the game, but you will. You'll see the power that comes from loyalty." Vera took a deep breath. Her sight, while still not perfect, was becoming clearer by the moment. She saw Karis's guards watching her closely, their hands twitching near their weapons. "You think you can just take everything from me, don't you?" Vera said, her voice rising. "I don't owe you anything." With those words, she moved quickly, her eyes scanning the room. She didn't have time to hesitate. As the guard stepped forward, she ducked low and grabbed a loose piece of metal from the floor, an old discarded tool from earlier in the room. In a split second, she lunged, knocking the weapon from one of the guard's hands. The other guard reacted fast, but Vera had a strength now that she hadn't before. With her enhanced sight, she could see the openings, the weaknesses, the patterns. She didn't think. She just acted. Within seconds, the guards were down. They weren't dead, just stunned and disarmed. Karis was speechless, watching from her high seat. Vera turned to face her, her heart racing, but now filled with a sense of power she had never felt before. "You thought I was weak," she said, her voice steady. "You thought I was nothing but a tool for you to use. But I am not your tool anymore." Karis stood up, her expression twisted in rage. "You think you can escape me?" "I don't need to escape," Vera replied, her eyes burning with determination. "I'm going to take my life back. Starting now." The sound of footsteps echoed down the hallway. More soldiers were coming. But Vera wasn't afraid anymore. She had her sight, her strength, and the will to fight. As the door behind her slammed open, she moved with speed and precision, taking control of the situation. She grabbed a nearby communicator from one of the guards and turned it on. "I'll tell you something, Karis," she said as the soldiers closed in. "I'm not alone anymore. and you're going to regret ever trying to control me." Vera stood in the heart of the Phaelon family ship, her breath steady and her hands now free from the chains that once held her. The guards lay unconscious on the floor around her, a testament to the sudden surge of strength she had found within herself. Her heart still raced, but now there was no fear, only the thrill of freedom, a feeling she had never known before. Her eyes, still adjusting to the implant, allowed her to see the world in ways she never could have imagined. The soft glow of the control panels in the room, the sharp lines of the doors, and the vibrant colors outside the ship's viewport. They were all new to her. She could finally see, and with her sight came a sense of clarity she had longed for her entire life. But there was something more important now than her newfound ability to see: her freedom. She turned her gaze toward the large, sleek chair where Lady Karis had been sitting moments before. Karis, now standing, watched her with cold fury in her eyes. "You think you've won," Karis sneered. "You're nothing but a traitor to your own blood. Do you really believe you can escape the consequences of this?" Vera stood tall, her body no longer trembling in the presence of the woman who had tormented her for so long. "I don't need to escape, Karis. I'm leaving, for good." Karis's eyes narrowed, but there was something in Vera's expression that made her hesitate. Vera wasn't the scared, blind girl she had been before. She was a woman, strong and determined, ready to take control of her own fate. The sound of footsteps echoed from the corridor, growing closer. The ship's security system was no doubt alerting the crew, preparing to recapture her. "You can't outrun me forever, Vera," Karis hissed. "You're still my daughter. I own you." Vera stepped forward, not flinching. "You never did." The soldiers were getting closer, but Vera wasn't afraid. She had a plan. She glanced around the room, scanning the options. The control panel at the back of the room seemed like the perfect place to start. She had no idea how to operate it, but she had come this far by trusting her instincts. Without another word, she darted toward the panel, her hands moving swiftly over the controls. Karis's voice rang out behind her. "Stop. You can't control this ship." "I don't need to control it, Karis," Vera replied, her voice steady. "I just need to get us out of here." As her fingers danced across the panel, Vera focused. The world around her seemed to blur as she honed in on the small, blinking lights that indicated key systems. She had always been clever, even without sight. Now, with her new vision, she could see the options more clearly. The lights flickered as the system came online. The engines hummed to life, and Vera felt the faint vibration under her feet. She smiled to herself. "You're making a mistake, Vera," Karis shouted, her voice thick with anger. "This is treason." Vera turned toward her, her eyes locking with Karis. "You're the one who made the mistake. You underestimated me." With a final press of a button, the ship began to move, slowly at first, then faster. Vera knew that it wouldn't be long before they reached the point where she could make her escape. "Where do you think you're going?" Karis asked, stepping toward her. "You think you can just leave and live happily ever after?" Vera stood tall, her heart filled with a newfound strength. "I'm not living in the shadows anymore. I'm going to live for myself, Karis. For once, I'm choosing my future." The ship's engines roared louder, and Vera felt the surge of speed beneath her feet. She glanced out the viewport to see the stars streaking by, the bright lights of Zereth growing smaller as they shot further into space. Karis's expression shifted, her eyes darkening with rage. "You won't get far. You can't survive on your own." Vera gave her one last, steady look before turning to the controls once more. "I don't need anyone to survive." She knew that the journey ahead would be difficult. There would be challenges, dangers, and more obstacles to overcome. But for the first time in her life, Vera was in control of her own destiny. As the ship continued to accelerate, Vera felt a sense of freedom she had never known before. She wasn't a prisoner anymore. She wasn't anyone's tool. She was a woman on her own path, determined to make a life for herself, and nothing would stand in her way.